everyone. Welcome back to Cincinnati Zoo Tales. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Mark. Thanks to all you listeners for tuning in to another episode. Jenna, we've got a really fun episode lined up today. I'm excited to hear about some amazing adventures some of our co-workers went on.
I'm jealous of.
Same, super jealous of. But we'll have our own adventure one day.
Yes.
But they went down to learn about sloths, everything about sloths in Costa Rica. So to introduce our team members here, we've got Tammy Ware, who's joining us for a second time. She's been on the show before, so we didn't scare her off. Thanks for coming back. Just as a reminder, Tammy is a senior keeper of our animal ambassador team. Thanks for coming. She takes care of our sloths here at the zoo, so it was really valuable to have her on the trip. We've got Patrick Cole. Patrick is an AmeriCorps Global Conservation member here at the zoo. This is Patrick's first time on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
And then rounding out the group, we've got Bailey Cadena. Bailey's the Coexistence Project Manager here at the zoo. So thanks for coming, Bailey.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks guys for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
We always like having a full house. I feel like these episodes are really fun when we got a big team here to talk about it.
Definitely. So we'll start off, Tammy, I know you told us a little bit about yourself, but tell us how you got started at the zoo and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I do have a way different background than most people, so I changed careers after 10 years, went to school, did some internships, and got my foot in the door here in Wild Encounters. Spent a year there, and then was fortunate enough to get a seasonal position with our Africa department, so I used to get to work with Jenna. That was before Mark was here, so I'm sorry we never got to work together.
Those were the glory days before I showed up.
Luckily, I became a temp, and then I moved on to the Animal Ambassador team, which was formerly known as Interpretive. So if you've been around for a while, that's probably what you might know it as. But we are currently the Animal Ambassador team, and so I've been in that department since early 2018.
It doesn't seem like that long.
Time has flown by.
And you've got a really cool story. What kind of spurred you to make the transition in your career towards wildlife?
Yeah, I was doing a job that was beneficial in the pocket, so I made good money and everything, and I was good at doing computer work. That's what I used to do, but I wasn't fulfilled in my heart. So I really wanted to do something that made me happy, and that I felt like I was making a difference. So I decided to go back and go to school so that I could work with animals, because that's what I felt really passionate about. And I really honestly believe that being happy is better any day than just having money, so to say. And I wanted to do something that I felt was meaningful work, and just I could feel good about myself every day looking in the mirror and knowing that I was doing something positive.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, I don't blame you. At least when you're having a bad day here, you can go look at an animal and help you feel better. And yeah, like you said, you can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Patrick, what about you? What brought you to Cincinnati Zoo? Kind of how'd you get your start in wildlife?
So, yeah, I also started off with a not zoo pathway. So I originally started school as a biochemist, and then decided that I liked bigger things than really tiny things. And that turned into working at Columbus Zoo for a little bit and worked in their education programs at doing their overnights, as well as COSI, which is a science museum up in Columbus.
Oh, nice.
After that, I jumped down to Wild Encounters, did Wild Encounters for a year. Wanted to try out some other things, so I went to the medical field for a hot minute, went into environmental regulation for a few years, and now I'm back doing AmeriCorps stuff, which has been super fun, and I'm working on my master's through Miami University through the AIP program, which is a cool zoo collaboration with Miami University.
Do you have a dream job in mind?
Oh gosh, I feel like I'm doing it right now. I love this position. Anywhere that I can help, you guys are keepers, and I appreciate that beyond belief. I know that I am not a keeper. I tried it for a minute, and I was like, this is not for me. But anything that I can help, I've really enjoyed helping partners globally be able to go through data, help them look through data, and things like that. That has been very meaningful to me. But any way that I can help people that are on the front lines being able to do their work is meaningful for me.
See, we said your title, but would you tell us exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis? Or not exactly, but give us an idea, because I work here and I really don't know a lot, and every time we do an episode with somebody I haven't gotten to know really well, I'm like, I don't actually know what you do here. There are so many jobs I didn't know existed that are relevant to this field, but not zookeeping.
I really wish I knew what I did most of the time. But it's a whole bunch of different things. So just as an example for today, I did some training with the teens, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. I've looked at hours and hours of sloth videos, which we'll also talk about a little bit later. It's also supporting Bailey, who's going to talk in a minute probably about what she does, as well as Lily, who is our boss. It's just all over the place. It could be talking to our visitor experience and our SSA teams about Roundup for Wildlife. It could be talking to teens about some of our cool conservation things. It's setting up the webinars that the zoo hosts internally, all those different things. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of different like catch-all jobs that I get to do. So it's fun. Every day is different.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah, a little bit like a jack of all trades, and I might be biased, but it sounds way better than biochemistry. Disrespect to all the chemists out there, but I don't know if that's for
There's
me.
some people that love that. That was just not for me.
And then a slight brag on Patrick, if I may. So the reason that we ended up deciding to visit in person with the Sloth Institute is because the Global Conservation AmeriCorps member, they do a lot of different things, right? We really like to pour into our AmeriCorps members to give them a lot of different experiences. But the main focus is to have a focal project to essentially elevate one of our partnerships to utilize the skills that exist here at the Cincinnati Zoo. And so that's what Patrick has done. And he set up this whole study that we're going to talk about later on. But that is the meat and potatoes of his day-to-day.
Awesome. So you set up a study. I wouldn't
Yes.
even know where to begin with that. So that's awesome. Yeah, and I can't wait
Same.
to hear more. Sounds like you figured it out.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Yes.
But Bailey, what's your story? What brought you to Cincinnati Zoo?
Yeah, excellent question. So my background has been all over. I grew up volunteering at a zoo as well, being part of a zoo teen program, and that was highly influential. All of the adult volunteers, all of the keepers that I interacted with, the guests and whatnot. And when I went to school, I studied both zoology and then also engineering.
Oh, wow. Sounds easy.
I get bored easily. I need to have a lot of things to do. But I've always been fascinated by the idea that there are these very technical skill sets that can be very important to bring into conservation. What we always say is we can't do conservation alone. Everybody's got a place in it. We need everybody at the table. So I worked as a civil engineer for a while, paid off some student loans on that very nice salary.
Heck yeah.
And then after that, I was like, all right, let's reevaluate. Something that we all bonded on, Tammy, Patrick, and I, is that we've reinvented our lives.
Yeah, all three of you. It is kind of wild.
That's amazing, yeah.
And I listened to the Coexistence Champions trip episode, and I know you guys talked a lot about Shannon, who would have thought graphics connection to
Yes.
conservation, but that's such an important message. Anyways, so when it was time for me to reevaluate things, I heard about the Cincinnati Zoo team, and I started learning about this coexistence approach and how people-focused it is and how centered in justice it is, and it really just aligned with my values and how I think conservation is most impactful to people and wildlife, and I was like, I would love to work on that team and grow here and be mentored here. So I actually came up through the AmeriCorps program as well, and now I'm here.
Would you guys tell us a little bit more about AmeriCorps? I know that's not what we were here to talk about. Maybe we should have a whole episode on that. But, I don't think I truly understand who all is eligible or who likely applies. It's not like an internship, right, where you have to be, recently out of college, usually, to get the position. Can you guys just tell us a little bit about how it works at the zoo, at least?
Yeah, I can chime in first, and then Patrick, if you have anything to add. I think it really depends on the hiring manager. So we've got a lot of different departments at the zoo that have AmeriCorps members. It started in education as a way to support some of their outreach programs, and it's grown into other departments as well. My mentor was just like, I'm going to pour into you. You've obviously expressed enough interest and want to grow in this field, and I know some other hiring managers that are that way as well. So it really just depends on the position and what everybody's looking for. But I know that a main theme is how can we pour into these members while they're here and give them the most professional development. So it's really a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, I was going to say, the key component of it is that nobody comes out of this being like, oh, I didn't learn anything. I have learned so much from everyone here, and even in skills outside of the conservation side that I have been doing. Each month we have professional development and have basically 8-hour seminar days of, hey, these are cool things that we could hit. So it's been resume building, stuff like that, interview questions. So stuff that can help you get jobs after AmeriCorps, because that is the goal of AmeriCorps, is it's kind of a transitional position to pour in, get these skills, get these resources, so that when you hit the ground running, you are well trained and ready for the workforce in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
And it's also 100% a service position. I do not work for the zoo. I am serving here at the zoo. I do get a stipend that helps me, but I'm serving here, and that is a major thing. So like, I'm not doing a job, I'm serving my community through the Sloth Institute work that I'm doing. The education program is serving the community through working with the students that they are working through. So it's very much service oriented and service focused, as well as being able to pour into those people that have that service heart to build into a relationship that keeps them on that track.
Okay, that makes sense because, yeah, again, I hear about it all the time, but I truly, like, just being somebody who works at the zoo, didn't really know the difference between, like, an internship and AmeriCorps and how that works. And I wonder how many people listening didn't know AmeriCorps existed or that they could be involved at a zoo through it. So
Yeah, or that AmeriCorps positions existed at the zoo. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a contract too, right?
Yeah,
Like-
my contract is 11 months,
Okay.
so I'm coming back next year, I think. Yes, I've signed that contract. I can't remember if I signed it.
He's having to change it up.
But so it's an 11th month contract. You can do it up to 2 years.
okay,
But it is basically that year you are spending all your focuses serving your community as well as getting poured into, so that when you step out that door, you are serving your community exponentially better than before, basically.
awesome.
No, that's amazing, and it sounds like Bailey and Patrick, your values, everything you stand for, really aligns with the zoo's core values. So it's a perfect match here, having you here at the zoo. Before we talk about the amazing, incredible trip that you all went on, Tammy, would you mind? You work with our sloths here.
I do.
Would you mind spending a couple minutes just to tell us a little bit about the sloths we have here, their names, personalities, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 3 sloths here. Our oldest one is Mo. He just turned 25 years old. He's been with us since he was 8 years old, but he was actually a wild-born sloth that had been abandoned. So we don't know exactly what happened, if his mom abandoned him, if somebody took him. Somehow he was orphaned. He ended up at a rescue place, and he spent his first 8 years up in Detroit somewhere, and then he came down to us when he was 8. So he's been here ever since. He's been a great ambassador for the zoo. So many people know who he is. He did tours for years and years and years. So many people have gotten to meet him.
I feel like he's like locally famous.
He
Like if you know, if you've lived in Cincinnati for a while, you probably heard him though.
Absolutely. He's got a fun backstory too that we can talk about another day. But then we brought in Lightning. We brought her back in late 2018. And so she came to us from El Paso Zoo, and they were brought together on the SSP recommendation for breeding. With Mo being a wild sloth, his genetics are very, very valuable, so they wanted to have some representation of them. So we put them together for breeding. They were successful. Unfortunately, the first one was stillborn. It happens a lot with animals, as we know. But as most people know, about 13 months ago, we did have another baby, Juno.
I can't believe it's been that long
I
either.
know,
Oh my
it's
God.
I was just about to say, Juno's 13 months old. This is insane.
He is. So he's our little guy. He's living up in the rainforest now. So he's chilling. He's being a sloth. He's doing sloth things up there.
Is he with Lightning?
Nope, he's by himself.
Okay.
So we found out a lot of information. I learned so much on this trip. Things I kind of knew and everything, but then having it reiterated and seeing it in person in the wild really cemented some of this stuff into my head and made me really appreciate and understand what I was teaching the public, that I was actually teaching them the right thing. So I was like, I always want to make sure that I'm spreading the right messages. But sloths are wildly, wildly solitary creatures, especially two-toed sloths. And that's what we have. We have two-toed sloths. They only come together for breeding purposes. You're not going to find any together unless it's a mom and her baby until she sends baby away, which is what Lightning did at 8 months old, or to Juno when Juno was 8 months old. So moms can separate from their babies anytime between 8 and 13 months. So Lightning was on the earlier side, and she was like, I'm done, let's go. So that's why they all live separately now. We will introduce Lightning and Mo together for breeding purposes, but then they live solitary lives as well. So currently we have Juno up in the rainforest. Lightning is residing in our Animal Ambassador Center. She's kind of hard to see, but she is kind of through the back enclosure. There's a window in there, so you can kind of see that. And then Mo is living his best retired life behind the scenes.
Awesome. Did you say how old Lightning was?
So Lightning's 11 years old.
Okay, and what's the average lifespan for a
So
sloth?
it's really interesting. The average lifespan out in the wild is mid-teens. That's about it. In zoos or other settings like this, they can live to be up to 30, maybe even to 40.
Oh, wow.
But a
That's a huge
story
difference.
just came out about a sloth in Germany who is 52, and he has sired 22 offspring.
Wow.
I was like baffled when I read that story. It came out after we got back from our trip. I was like, oh my gosh. I would love it if Mo would live that long. I don't think Mo will last that long. So he's just he already acts a little older. He's chilling.
That would be hard to tell with the sloth. They don't do a whole lot.
It's true. Very, very true.
He's moving extra slow this week. How do you know for like the breeding situation? Does Lightning give you signs? Are you guys tracking
Yes.
her hormones? How can you guys tell?
Yeah, it's so crazy because it's she makes it very obvious.
Okay.
And so we would pair them together in 2 enclosures side by side, and they live next to each other and show no interest, even though they can smell each other and everything. That they will show zero interest. And then she cycles about every 45 days or so. And so we can kind of tell by her behavior when she is cycling. And then when it sounds like or seems like it's getting close to that, we'll open the shift doors and we'll see. So like when we put them together for breeding last, we would open the shift door, might lift their head and be, I'm not doing anything, not interested. Fine, that's fine. Close the shift door, whatever. So we would do that. And on about day 4, I came in and both of them were up and they were both at the shift door, like waiting. And so open the shift door and immediately there's interest in each other. And so we'll do that for about a week because their interest will be like, hey, let's just see each other, let's be friends and all this. They do this really cute greeting. They actually will kiss each other. So they'll lick each other's tongues and their noses and stuff like that. So that's kind of like their little greeting. So they did that for like a day or 2, and then that was about all the interest they had. But then about day 3 to about day 5, there's actually some interaction between the 2 of them and some breeding. And so after that, it kind of dwindles again. They might like go see each other and then go back, and then you get to about day 7 and there's like, maybe they lift their head, maybe they don't. You're like, cool, we know she's cycling. Her cycling is done, so we don't have to try anymore. So
And what's the gestation?
it's between 11 and 12 months.
It's longer than you would think, I feel like.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I think hers last time was about 346 days, somewhere in that number. Yeah, very, very long gestation.
Especially for such a small animal.
I
Like you kind
know.
of just expect smaller animals usually have a shorter period.
You
but-
would think, but
Wow.
because their whole internal system is slow, like their digestion is slow. It takes them about 3 weeks to digest their food. They go to the bathroom only about once a week, things like that. So like everything about them, their metabolism, their heart rate, everything is so much slower. So the developmental stage too, the process of creating
Makes sense.
a baby is also a lot slower.
Can you tell everyone like what their natural habitat is, what they would eat in the wild, what they eat here? Do
Yeah.
they have any favorite foods?
Yeah, so in the wild, they live out in the rainforest. They live up at the canopy of the rainforest. So I felt like I got pretty good at finding sloths in the tree because you're basically looking for a wig and nothing else. But yeah, so they live way up in the canopy of the trees. It is hard to find them, and it does take a lot of observation skills and a lot of like hours and hours and hours of trying to figure it out until you can finally start spotting sloths. And even then, sometimes you doubt yourself and then you're like, oh wait, that's just a coconut. We did that a lot. But so in the wild, they're going to eat all browse. So they're eating their plant matter. So they eat all the leaves, the branches, the barks. Maybe they'll eat the flowers. 3-toed sloths, that's all they eat. 2-toed sloths, they have been able to evolve enough to be able to eat fruits and vegetables. So that's why if you go to a zoo or an aquarium or anywhere that has sloths, they're going to have 2-toed sloths because we can safely provide food and nutrition for them, as to where a 3-toed sloth, it's too hard to get the appropriate diet
I've never
for
even
them.
thought about that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and one thing that we found out is like everybody knows 3-toed sloths because that's the one that was in Zootopia and things like that. They're the ones with the cute little face, with the happy face, the mask and everything. But you don't see them as much in person. This is my first time seeing them in person at all. But they actually separated, what'd she say, almost 40 million years ago. They have been so far removed that even though they're both sloths, there's like no similarities hardly between them at all.
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting. But 2-toed sloths, since they can eat fruits and vegetables, we have them at zoos. So we do feed them the browse, we do feed them greens, we feed them all lettuces and stuff, but also fruits and vegetables. So like Mo's favorite, he loves his corn on the cob, his egg. Lightning is definitely a sweet tooth girl. She loves all of her fruits. And Juno, we were very intentional about not just giving the sweet things. So Juno will pretty much eat almost everything we give him, and he'll whenever he does want to work and target train for us and stuff like that, he'll eat almost anything that we offer. So his sweet potato, any of his fruit, any of his veggies, maybe not tomato, but other than that, like, he's pretty good about eating whatever we offer him.
Awesome. So I think there's probably a lot of interesting facts about sloths, but something that surprised me, because I did work with Mo for a short period of time, and their teeth are like much different than you would expect when you just look at them from the outside. Can you tell us a little bit about their teeth?
Yeah, so they have very large, what we call false canines, because they look like our canine teeth or like a lion's canine teeth. They're very large, but they don't actually eat meat. But they use those to help strip away like the plant matter, the branches. They will use them to like rip off all the leaves from the branch that they're holding. They also use them as a self-defense mechanism. One thing I found wildly fascinating is that in the wild, because they eat so much browse, their teeth are actually black and not white. So I was fascinated by that, because we got to see some that were injured, that were in being rehabilitated and being worked with and everything, and I was confused on why their teeth were black, but I found out that's natural because of the tannins from the leaves. It dyes the teeth black.
Ah, that makes sense. And people ask about like hippo teeth, and I'm like, this is natural for them to have like black parts. I wonder if it's from what they eat.
I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like you would assume that a sloth is very harmless, but they can in fact bite and cause a lot of damage, and their feet or their claws or toes, or do you call them claws?
I call them claws. Or nails. I call
Nails,
them nails.
yeah. Are actually very like dangerous as well if they need them to be.
And they're so much stronger than anybody wants to give them credit for, because their ligaments and their tendons are so powerful. They don't really have that much muscle mass, but they can grab you, and like if Lightning is angry and she grabs me, I'm not getting away from her. So you have to be really careful about that, but that's their first instinct, is to grab and pull towards their mouth and bite. So that's how they're going to defend themselves. So, but they are so powerful.
Yeah, you wouldn't think of a sloth.
No.
So.
Is it true, I want to ask you, is it true that sloths always come down from the trees to use the bathroom? I've heard that before, but didn't know if it was a myth or if there's
No, it's true. It's true. Unless you're Juno, yes, that is the absolute truth.
Unless you're Juno.
Unless you're Juno. Yeah, that's sloths. They come down to the ground to go to the bathroom. They pee and they poop at the same time, and then they go back up the tree. And that's how they keep themselves safe from predators, because they're not going to the bathroom while they're up there. They're not spreading their poop everywhere and their pee everywhere. So they literally come down, go into one little pile, and then go straight back up the tree. So
once a week.
About
That's
once
it.
a week. Lightning goes about every 3 to 4 days, but a typical sloth is usually closer to once a week. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I love hearing about the sloths. Thanks for sharing all that with us.
Absolutely.
Patrick, I guess this whole trip was a genesis of part of your work. Would you tell us how that all kind of got started?
Yeah, so it all started basically with a conversation with the Sloth Institute, which is the partner that we work with. Basically, they had a call with us. Tammy was on that call. We were just checking in with them around December and just hearing about what they were doing, and they were talking about their sloth speedways. So a sloth speedways is basically a piece of rope that they've hung up between two different trees where the canopies no longer touch. But they had these cameras in these ropeways looking at them to see if the sloths or any other animals were using them, but they didn't really have anything that they were doing with them other than using them for social media, and they really had the want to get more data out of that. So out of that conversation, we had worked with them, we got them more cameras, and then we have designed a full study around that to try and figure out how can we build this best speedway for sloths in Costa Rica, and hopefully throughout all of the home countries of sloths throughout Central America. So the study has been ongoing. We had to run the cameras down there for them because that was the most financially feasible way to do it at the time, and collected a whole bunch of data while we were down there. And now we are in the process of going through hundreds of videos, seeing who has walked across these speedways as we've gone through there.
Is there a lot of boring moments?
Oh my gosh.
Really exciting ones too.
It is rainy season currently, which means rain. And as you can imagine, these aren't the typical trap cameras that you would see in like wildlife shows. These are actually security cameras. Because of where they are located, they have Wi-Fi capabilities. So we are able to just Wi-Fi download it. So I'm able to just download the videos to my phone, so they don't have to worry about like shipping them out to me, and it saves them a step basically. So basically,
aren't they motion sensor too?
They are motion sensor as well. So it's like a motion sensor security camera. So any rain will set it off. Any tree branch in a rainforest will set it off. So There are, I think, when I did the preliminary study of just seeing, okay, what are we working with, it was somewhere between 40 and 70% were blank, where it was just a tree branch moving or rain hitting the screen of it. I think it might have been reduced a little bit because as we placed new cameras, it made it a little bit easier so it doesn't catch as many tree branches or it doesn't catch as much major movement of tree branches moving. But it's sometimes a lot of looking at trees and being like, is there something there? And then, oh yeah, there it goes, right across the roadway.
That's going to be exciting when you...
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Have you seen anything other than sloths using them?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think I've had like 8 or 9 species on there.
Easy.
So, endangered squirrel monkeys are my favorite right now because they're tiny little squeaky monkeys that will just sprint across the roadways. And they always have these tiny little babies on, so you just see the little tiny string of a tail that's hanging off of mom. There are white-faced capuchin monkeys. There are mantled howlers. We've seen a tamandua before. We've seen possums. We've seen a lot of kinkajous. Not porcupine. Sorry, I was not the same species as Rico, but his northern cousins. As well as we've seen like a parrot land before. I've seen one lizard before. I couldn't identify it though. But for the most part, it is those primates that I was talking about, and then 2 and 3 toad sloths that we're seeing on the roadways.
That's amazing. So, I mean, these are obviously being used, and that should be a good selling point to do more. Did you say, and I missed it, how many cameras and how many of the road... What are you calling them? I'm sorry.
So they're sloth speedways because it's such a great...
Speedways, okay.
But it's about 84. That number has probably increased since we were there last.
84 cameras or 84 speedways?
84 speedways throughout their area. And there's about 16 cameras up. Now there might be more, but I do not have access to those because they're using them for a different thing right now. So and they're not going to that study.
Of those speedways, it's 1,200 meters of Sloth Speedway road that have been installed.
Yeah. Wow.
That gives you a good number. So, but we took down 20 cameras, and they already had how many?
4.
4 already up. So in total, once they get all of them installed, it'll be 24 cameras that they've got on those 80 something, right?
And that's just for that basically local area. So they work out of a resort called Tulamar Resort. They help kind of support them being able to work out of that area. But because they're in that area, they have a lot of their ropeways in that area because they don't have to ask for landowner uses. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of private landowners that ask for their help, so there's ropeways that are kind of scattered throughout Manuel Antonio as well. But a good chunk of it is in that Tulamar area where when we were there, we saw probably like 30 sloths in just this resort area. Mm-hmm. And there's probably more that we even missed from that. So there's a lot of movement and a lot of connectivity that goes through that area on the Pacific side and kind of crosses them over to where the national park is and over to the more inland side of Manuel Antonio.
Oh, nice. Would you guys tell us a little bit about like how the Cincinnati Zoo got involved with the Sloth Institute and sort of the support that we're able to provide for them?
Yeah, so we had another keeper here back in 2014 who kind of met Sam, who runs the Sloth Institute, and befriended her and everything, and was like, what can we do to support you? And so it started off by we started doing a little bit of touring to raise money for it. We did a couple fundraisers. She got a couple of grants as well. We were giving them money to buy collar trackers for some of the sloths that they had rescued and re-released. And then it just grew from there. So because of their partnership and their relationship, that's how we started doing our sloth tours, or why we started doing our sloth tours, was how can we raise money to help support them. So I know you guys have talked about tours in the past, but that is literally why we do our sloth tours to this day. We do them 4 days a week, but it is specifically to raise money for the Sloth Institute. So last year, all the money that we raised from our tours is what we used to buy those 20 cameras. So we're using the money for different projects. Instead of it just being a general use, we usually talk with them and decide what they need the most, and then we put the money towards that piece of equipment or whatever that they need.
Can you tell us what the Sloth Institute does, why they're needed? Are sloths considered endangered at this point? What does the Sloth Institute do?
Yeah, so they are strictly rescue, release, rehab type thing. So they take in any injured sloths, orphan sloths. They try to rehabilitate them. They re-release them. They don't do anything as far as They do tours, but their tours are literally walking tours of the area and to train you how to find a sloth and to help you identify sloths in the trees
Cool.
and talk about them. But that's their biggest mission, is like helping preserve and save sloths, because while they're not endangered, their numbers are dwindling, but also they're just having less space to go. And so sloths each have like a range of like 5 to 6 trees. And so you can imagine if you have now this whole little area where they can't get out of because the rainforest has been broken, because they've been putting up power lines or whatever. So sloths can't go from point A to point B. You're not able to create any kind of diversity within the breeding population. They're all kind of consolidated, and their whole mission is being able to get sloths to move naturally, move to all these different places, while educating the public and while making sure that like everything's being done responsibly.
The other thing that I would add, in addition to those animal care centric focus that they have, is they also do have with this Sloth Speedway program, as we talked about, many different species use these ropeways, and or they benefit from having their canopy more connected. So a really awesome example is when we first got to the location and we're about to meet the Sloth Institute team for the first time. We pulled up and there is a ropeway that goes across this very busy road that we had just driven down. And these squirrel monkeys are critically endangered in Costa Rica, of national interest. And we pull up and we hear all this squeaking and look up, and there's a whole troop of squirrel monkeys that are crossing this road. And without this ropeway, they would not be able to get from that piece of canopy to the next. And so the effort that the Sloth Institute puts in, while they use the face of the sloth, and that is where their husbandry skills lie, it's having ramifications for many species, and it's really landscape level focused. They work with landowners very, very heavily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're doing so much. Like they're expanding what they do as well. They do have 8 sloths that they currently track, ones that have been rehabbed and re-released. But then they monitor all the other sloths in that area. But then they go and they help other places too. So they'll go to other facilities and they'll share their expertise. So while we were there, we got to watch them take care of one that had been on a power line that had been electrocuted. Oh, no. So because sloths have horrible eyesight, and so if they're trying to get from point A to point B and the only thing for them to grab is a power line, they're going to think it's a tree and they grab it. And so like they work with the electrical company. So if there's a sloth on a power line, they'll call TSI and be like, hey, can you guys come out and help us get this sloth off of this power line? Because most of them aren't, like most technicians aren't trained to know how to handle a sloth because they are wildly aggressive. It may not seem like it, but they are, especially wild sloths. They are super aggressive. We saw it firsthand. There was also one that the other issue that they are battling right now is mange in wild dogs. And so because if these dogs are coming into contact with sloths when they're coming down to go to the bathroom, they're passing on mange. And so one of the other ones that was there was being treated for mange. And so to see him being treated, and clearly a very, very wild sloth, but just to see like the pictures of what he looked like when he came in to now is really amazing. And then on top of that, like all of the orphan sloths, so they had 4 different age ranges of sloths there, younger sloths that they were taking from like incubators out to the next stage, to pre-release pens, trying to get them acclimated to being out in the wild and everything before they send them back out into the wild. And they always try to re-release either where they were abandoned at or as close to it as possible. And then if they can't, then they would release closer to where their facility itself is, and maybe even track it. So.
Yeah, and I just want to build on something that Tammy said that I know that you both can probably relate to in keeping for and taking care of our vultures, right? Is one of their biggest threats is electrical lines. And that's globally, right? And so you'd think if I were somebody who's just walking around my daily life, I would never think, an electrician can have a massive conservation impact. But by TSI working with the electrical company, not only do they work to support safely getting these sloth individuals to the right place, but they've also worked, what is that word called?
Yeah,
insulation. Yeah, they've worked with the electrical companies to insulate the lines where animals are crossing them, right? And so that decreases the electrocutions before they happen.
Yeah.
which again has greater impacts than not just sloths, because
Right. I was actually really lucky and went to Manuel Antonio, which is the most beautiful place in the world, for my honeymoon. And we were hearing all about it and seeing, I think we saw one, like missing a howler monkey, I think missing a hand. Like they are, lots of animals, like you mentioned, even with good eyesight, are using these power lines that aren't insulated correctly and getting electrocuted and getting burns. And you'll probably see that if you follow any like wildlife pages in Africa or all over the world, like you mentioned. And it's one of those things that if you can get the companies to care and be working together with them, then maybe that could be reduced a ton. And I don't know, is it truly just a rope when you say
Yes.
the
Yeah,
Sloth
100%.
Speedway?
100%, yeah.
So it's like,
Some are blue, some are green, some are brown.
and I think that's what they were trying to color code them so the monkeys could learn which were safe and which were not. I don't know if you guys heard
I've
about any
heard
of this.
that. That's
This was
cool.
11 years ago. I hardly like remember it exactly, but I think they were learning colors like to know which ones were dangerous
that's
and which
really
were not.
interesting because we didn't see any black ropeways, which is the color of the
Yeah.
electrical lines.
So
that we
literally,
saw.
like she told us, she was like, we take whatever color they get us because most of the ropes are donated by people.
Oh, so I was gonna say this seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
Like we can send a bunch of rope. I don't like.
Yeah.
How hard is it though? Like how long are they during? Is it just over a roadway? Is it like what's the longest length of rope? Is this something?
The longest one is probably the one they put in Boca.
Yeah.
The longest one that we probably saw while we were down there was probably 100 yards, maybe
Okay.
120.
That's long.
That's
yeah.
a good distance.
It was
Yeah.
a huge
yeah.
distance. I mean, that's 1/10 of what. Well, no, I guess
I'm
it's
trying to
meters
think what
instead of
that
yards.
was.
Never mind.
Yeah, but like typically, I think when they said it's typically like somewhere between 15 and 45 meters. And I would say for most of ours, it's in that 15 to 45 meter range.
Like more just over a roadway, basically.
Over a roadway.
Yeah.
So like, to explain the resort area, it's like if you were going to a resort area that had like individual houses that you could stay in. So there's all these little cut through pathways to get to your house or get to the restaurant and things like that. So there's a lot of hills. That was something that kind of threw me off that I wasn't aware of. The resort area is basically an incline down to the ocean that is switchbacked all the way down. So any time a tree is getting cut, it's basically changing like there's an elevation shift because now the tree was on that hill. I know this is great podcasting trying to
If you could see Patrick's
but
hand.
yeah, but basically because the trees are at different heights because they're on different sizes of the hill, it means that there's even less like contact points. So each tree that you cut down on that hill means that there's less canopy cut touching. So basically the pathways, the roadways, like little cartways that the maintenance people were going through, all those places had ropes going across them. I
It's
think
amazing
the
they're
most,
willing to work with the Sloth
exactly,
Institute.
it's wonderful that they're working with them.
Yeah.
I think the most iconic is a parking lot that, like, in the camera you can see the parking lot right there, and it overlooks the ocean, which you're like,
beautiful.
oh, it's a beautiful look. But then that's like one of the highest used ropeways is because it's parking lot, open sky, and basically no trees. So almost everything that wants to get from one side to the other has to use this one ropeway to go through it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of activity on that.
And see, my
speedway.
brain's like, let's send them 5 more. So their parking lot has 5 speedways instead of 1. That's so simple, right? I don't know if it is. I remember learning
That's-
about palm oil being an issue too. Did you guys learn about that at all? Like any ropeways crossing, speedways
So,
crossing palm oil?
That was something that
plantations?
was really surprising to me because when I think of palm oil, I traditionally think of the messaging has been successful, right? Because we all think of orangs.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I think of a completely different part of the world. And so when we were driving from the capital city down to Manuel Antonio, we're like, is this a palm oil farm?
Yeah.
Like, are we driving? And so that was one of the big questions that we've had. Because how do you do sustainable palm oil? There's been so much conversation around it, and our partners Hutan, who are part of our orangutan save, they recently have been doing studies of how can orangs thrive in these landscapes, and it's shown that orangs can successfully move through palm oil farms if you work with those people. And their other big point that they like to get across is that compared to every other alternative, palm oil per acre, per area unit, produces more oil than any alternative. So there's an aspect there.
Huh.
So
That's
had
a whole nother podcast. I
Yeah,
bet.
it is.
So many questions for you to write down.
Me too.
Wow.
Yeah, and so with all of that, just thinking about sustainable palm oil and how can we do it is a big question that our teams are asking. And we recently learned all about this, and then are driving through these farms. And what Sam had told us, the Sloth Institute partner, is because it's regulated in Costa Rica and they can't expand to deforest anymore.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That it's not as destructive as we typically think about it, but
Well,
it is a monoculture, right? So
And it started as a different plant there, and the plant wasn't surviving, and so the farmers were trying to figure out what could they grow on this same land. They're very locked in; they can't go anywhere, like Bailey said. But that was the best solution of what they could actually grow there that would survive compared to the previous plant. I cannot remember what the previous plant was, but I remember something else had been harvested there, and it all died.
For some reason, I thought it was banana, but I'm not positive on that.
Yeah, I can't remember. But it was really interesting to hear that how regulated it is.
Yeah, and when Sam talked about those farms, she said explicitly, "Oh yeah, they will call us if they find animals." And another partner that they work with that does other animals, they're like, "Oh yeah, they will call us and let us know." So they are very much aware of the animals that are going through their palm plantations, and like keeping an eye and thinking about that animal biodiversity and trying to keep those animals safe that are in their plantation. From the sounds of it,
That's good. It sounds like a lot of people are aware of what's going on in Costa Rica and they seem to care.
Yeah, it's like that community-based conservation we talk a lot
Yeah.
about, where it's like, if you really want this plan to be successful, you need to get the community to buy in. And if the palm oil farmers are willing to call in, animal groups that can professionally come in and take care of the animals, like, that's amazing. I love that partnership. That's very valuable. Yeah.
This is off topic. I think, well, I asked about AmeriCorps, but Bailey, tell us what you do actually too. Your job still, I should know a little bit more about yours, but that's more, you're working with the community, you're working with people a lot, right? So will you tell us, we're going to backtrack and tell us more what you do.
You can absolutely backtrack. So I can tie it into just, I think, the collaboration that this is, right? We're sitting around the table, conservation impact team and animal team members, and we each bring different skills. So our department, and kind of, I guess, the zoo's approach to conservation in a lot of ways, is this term coexistence. So how can we invest in landscapes where there are both people and wildlife? And that comes from this justice center. Having protected areas is ecologically important. Nobody's doubting that, right? But that cannot be the only tool that we have in our conservation tool belt. We also really need to invest in these landscapes, like these palm oil farms, like these resort towns, like road areas, where people are living and hopefully thriving, living their best life. How can we ensure that we live alongside wildlife and really think about that? So a lot of what I do is get to know our partners. For example, you all heard from the Coexistence Championship about our work in Kenya with our partners, Soralo. I like to say that Soralo taught the zoo how to do coexistence. We learned alongside them. And an example of something that I work on is developing our bead sale program. So the women in this region have asked for the zoo's support in selling beads to our audiences that really want to get engaged in conservation. And so working with both the women and then the teams at the zoo that we have, our awesome SSA team, our marketing team, to tell these stories and sell these beads. With the same partner, I also work with our maintenance and aquatic staff, who are experts in water quality, right? We've got lots of animals that live in water. You guys work with a few of them. And how can we use their skills and engage in with our conservation partners that are dealing with water quality and water quantity issues. They've got, in the face of climate change, more extreme drought and flooding. And the folks on that team have a lot of thoughts and expertise to share, and so we've started some of that knowledge sharing. So my job is to kind of bridge these gaps between our partners and our teams, because everybody at the zoo wants to contribute to conservation and has something to contribute. And our partners want all of our help. So how can I make sure that we're matchmaking appropriately?
You're like
That's
a connector. Like,
Yeah. Somebody called our department the pollinating.
Oh, I like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. which means I get to work with a lot of awesome people. It's kind of the dream.
Yeah, a lot of different things that are meaningful. Like I would imagine you get to have a lot of meaningful conversations or like idea sessions.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, like, having Tammy be a part of this was just invaluable, absolutely invaluable. There are so many things that we learned, or as we got in to the area and we started to further design the study because we had an idea, but you never really know until you get to a place. Tammy was like, well, Sloths would never use that ropeway. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And obviously TSI knows these things as well, but when it was just me, Patrick, and Tammy ideating how to set up the cameras and whatnot, her knowledge of how these guys move was invaluable.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like basically your whole kind of goal for the trip, right, was to go down and help the Sloth Institute continue to set up these sloth speedways, maybe make them a little bit more efficient, and then get the cameras put up, right, so that you can track it and actually collect data.
Yes. Yeah. So the ropes were mostly set up. We didn't set up, and our job was to execute Patrick's vision for this study and Sam's vision, right? We had a big team. We've got somebody on our team who's a research expert as well, so she helped design the study. And so we were setting up the study and collecting data. Patrick can kind of talk a little bit more about that.
So, as you guys know, animals get a little bit weirded out with new things that come into their area. That's the same with wild animals. If you put up a ropeway, depending on the species, it could take up to months to years for them to come into it. Some of the studies I was reading, like out of Madagascar, it takes like a year and a half for them to start using any like ropeways that they've been using. So we wanted to make sure that we were using ropeways that were already like well maintained and well used by the animals. Just so
when you say using them, you mean putting placing a camera near that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we wanted to make sure that those cameras were on the ones that we knew that animals were already kind of using. And that had been up for at least like a year, so we didn't have any animals that were getting spooked away because it's something new in their area.
That makes sense.
So, what was the exact question again? My brain just kind of...
Well, the reasoning for the trip,
just like the overall goal.
It was financially responsible to deliver them, so we
Yes.
should all go to Costa Rica.
100%.
And that was the reason.
We're done.
Relationship build, I'm sure.
Yeah, relationship building, but like the main goal was to go down there and basically take off the onus of doing the research from TSI. They're a small team. They're 9 to 11 people.
Okay. Including all their volunteers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like they're tiny. So being like, okay, we need you to set up 20 cameras and take all these data points and then actually send it up to us and send us the data and all that stuff. That's not realistic. That's not actually us helping them. That's us putting our name on it and saying, hey, we did it, hooray! Yeah. Where it was a lot more beneficial for us to go down there. We only had like 1 or 2 staff with us that was just kind of guiding us around, but we did almost all the data collection. There's a few things that they just have the expertise that they're going to give us, but they put up the cameras, we got all the data while they were putting up the cameras. We were like, hey, we want them on here and here because I think that will make the best study for this. We've done all the study design of like, okay, we want this many ropeways, we need to look at them from this angle, this is how we're going to define if they're using the ropeway or not. How do we count species? How do we count number? Is it going to be by individual? Are we going to count 27 squirrel monkeys the same as a 1 sloth? And you have to kind of go through those. So a lot of it was research and design prior to that, and then going down there and facing the reality of what it actually looks like down there and playing it on the go to get those data points that we need.
So how high are the cameras being placed and what are you using? Are you carrying a ladder through the rainforest?
So Michael is their staff that handles the ropeways, and he does some other stuff. So he also collect fresh food for the sloths that are in there. So he'll go up in his ladder and literally grab the fresh guaramo fruit for them because that's their favorite snacks. And like go through there and they'll go through, clean all that stuff. But his job is to maintain those cameras. So basically he has a ladder that he was just climbing like it was nothing up in these trees like 20, 30 feet up. I think the tallest one that we weren't there for when they put it up was probably like 50 feet,
wow.
55 feet.
Way up there.
Yeah, it was like you can see like ocean in the distance. You can see the mountains over here. Yeah, you can see the whole hill of it, and then just like one tree here, and then there's a big old ropeway that connects another high canopy that the sloths would have never been able to connect unless they had that one. And it literally is so cool because it connects super high up on this hill, they can climb down, and then it actually connects into another ropeway system.
Awesome.
So it basically is like a connector system from way high up to a lower area, and gives them a lot more movement range.
Helps them change elevation.
Yeah,
Shout
very
out to
much
Michael.
so.
This dude sounds
Yes.
like a legend.
Yeah,
Shout
he's
out to
crazy.
Amazing.
And it just
All the
shows
staff
that
there.
if you're a climber, we need you in
Yeah,
conservation.
exactly. We've got jobs for you.
Seriously.
So, like, I don't know much about research or data collection. Do you have a specific question you're asking? Or, like, are you just trying to find out how many sloths are using this or where you need more? Or is there, like, a...
Yeah.
The big question, if I can, is just what makes a ropeway usable? What is the best ropeway that will make the sloths use them? Be it all of these variables that Patrick will expand on, and then also other species as well.
Yeah, so anecdotally, we know if there's too much slack in the rope, certain animals won't use it, especially sloths. They don't like that wiggliness of the rope. So if the rope
Which I
is
imagine
taut,
a tree branch would wiggle, but they only
But-
use, like, really thick or strong ones? Or...
but it wouldn't move in the same way, because you have to think, like, if it's swaying like this, it isn't as much as, like, a tree branch where it just kind of bends one way.
Oh, okay.
So it just has too much movement, especially with these places. If the canopy is broken up, there's a lot of wind that's throwing the rope a little bit.
Okay.
So even when I see, like, frames without sloths in it or any animals in it, the rope is always slightly moving.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Go-
another big part of that too is like specifically with sloths is they're used to being under cover. They're used to being
yeah, that's a good point.
under branches, lots of leaves and stuff like that. Even when they're moving from tree to tree, there's usually coverage above them. So where you have these much longer ones
yeah,
where
they'd be
there's no
super
canopy,
vulnerable.
they're so vulnerable. So it's a lot harder for them to use those than it is the shorter ones that are connected from tree to tree.
And it makes sense why they would be hesitant to use them for so,
So
long until
that
they're,
is-
like, desperate or
Yeah,
whatever.
so that is a point that we were looking at. We're looking at canopy cover from where they're starting, in the middle, and where they're going to see if they have higher canopy cover, if it helps, if it has lower canopy cover, if they're using it more often. Luckily, I've never seen any predation of any species on the ropeways, which is very cool, knock on wood. But yeah, the big openness is a big concern. We're also wondering if it is tree species specific. So we're looking at the species that sloths really like. So there's 3 species that they really like. So there's beach almond, guaromo, and then a type of tree called an inga. It's a whole bunch of different types of trees, but those are the 3 that sloths will gravitate towards.
Okay.
So we're looking at, okay, if the ropeway has all these located nearby, are they more likely to use it? Is there
Oh, that
more
makes
movement
sense.
around there? As well as, if there's only one of the species, are they preferring that species over another species? What is making them gravitate towards one ropeway versus another?
Okay.
We're also looking at seeing if there's a height thing. So, like, sloths usually aren't at the tippy top of a tree, and they're usually not at the very base. They're usually, like, in the middle third. So seeing if they are tying it lower, if they're still using it, if they're tying it higher, if they're still using it, or if they're only using it in that sweet spot of that, like, middle third.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What made you want to do, out of all the projects, out of all the conservation things we do here, what made you pick the sloths?
I think it was the direct need, because it was right when I was about starting. I was, like, ideating and trying to figure out, okay, we've got all these partners, who do we want? And they were one of the first people to say, hey, this is our vision, this is what we need. And it felt very much, oh yeah, this is something that I enjoy, this is something that I feel like I can dovetail into, and you know that you have this need that you want, let me fill this need.
Cool.
So it was very cool to be able to see, oh yeah, I have these skills that I can fit in here, and that takes off all this stress and all this extra work that you guys were going to try and have to do on top of helping many sloths that are injured and needing care for, and then trying to figure out a research study on top of that. Let me take that off your plate for you.
Perfect.
Yeah, especially if it's such a small team at the Sloth Institute. Kind of what you said sticks with me. Like, if we just sit there and told them, like, hey, we need you guys to put up all these cameras, send us all this data, like, we just added more to their plate. We didn't help them conserve anything. If anything, they're probably, like, spiteful about that. Like, what the heck?
And, like, with the cameras, the original ask was, hey, we get these videos, but we can't look through them at any point because, like I said, there's 9 people. In a day, when they had 4 cameras, they were getting about 70 to 80 photos a day.
Oh my gosh.
And that's not counting, like, the blank ones. So if you're sitting through 80 videos, they're max of 3 minutes. You're spending half your day just looking at those videos if you
Yeah.
want. And you're not going to catch everything in that way. So being able to let us do it, and what I was training this morning was I was teaching teens to start looking at these videos.
Perfect.
So now we've got at least 10 to 15 teens, it's probably going to be higher in the 20s, that are going to be looking through these videos for the rest of the summer and help get this data, as well as they're learning cool, valuable skills of how to do like camera trapping.
Another job that exists that I definitely
Yeah.
didn't know existed as a
Crazy.
teen.
Yeah.
Like,
So they're getting these research skills, and TSI is getting somebody to look at these videos. And I even have a button where it's like, hey, is it cool? And they just click yes or no. So then I immediately get pinged of, oh, this is a cool video. Let me send it off to the Sloth Institute.
cool.
So that they've got something for social media if they want.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm very excited. We are starting them sometime either, I think it's early next week that they're going to be doing their first round of it. So
Nice.
Do you guys provide them with like tablets or computers, or where did the teens do this on their phone?
they're able to do it on their phone, and then we just
Wow.
pull up the videos on a big screen in an office, and they're going to be going off the office screen, and then individually they're going to be on their phones, because it's just a Microsoft form that I've built out for them. So they're going through there, clicking out the data, clicking in the information, and then pressing send, and then it goes to an Excel sheet for me.
Very cool.
Right?
One of my favorite parts of engaging the teens is every video will be watched by 3 different people.
Oh yeah.
And so by expanding and including the teens, like, talk about youth empowerment, our data is better because they've said yes to being a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's like verified data, and then you're also building this next generation of conservationists who are hopefully going to carry these skills and develop them the older they get. That's incredible.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they volunteer for this, or were they picked, or
Yes,
how did
they
you decide?
actually had an application. So
Oh, awesome.
it was just a quick little application of, why do you want to do this? How do you think it would benefit you?
Oh, cool.
And their responses were fantastic. Every single one of them was like, yes, I'm here. One of them had been down to Manuel Antonio and
no way.
was talking about that. And it was a great day to be able to read those applications and hear all like the happy, I want to do this. I know this might be like daunting and I might stare at a tree for 3 hours, but I want to do this.
That is kind of like, it could be boring at times,
Oh.
but they're willing to do it.
Yeah, which is what's so cool is like,
Yeah.
yes, I understand that this might not be the most fun half hour to an hour that I'm spending at the zoo. I could be out in the zoo looking at animals, but I'm here and I'm wanting to learn these skills and help a conservation organization get new data and hopefully help sloths out in the wild. It's so cool.
That is so cool.
That's amazing. Did you guys have like a big takeaway from the trip, whether it was like a special a moment with an animal you saw, or like a team member down at the Sloth Institute, or even just like a local community member? Did you have like a special takeaway moment for each of you?
Very good question. Do you have any that come to mind?
Oh my gosh, I have so many, but I know for me personally, like, our department used to every year send 2 keepers down to the Sloth Institute to go work with them for a week. And so we could be like their volunteers, we could help them out, we could help them do research, we could help them track sloths, do rehab stuff, whatever needed to be done. And so it was a really cool idea and a really cool partnership. And then when COVID hit, I was supposed to go, and the program kind of got axed and we never got to go back. So being asked to go was just, with Patrick and Bailey, was just like a dream of mine, because I've been looking forward to going for almost 6 years. And meeting Sam, I've heard all these amazing stories about it. But just seeing it in action, seeing the sloths out in the wild and everything was just so amazing for me and just refreshing for me. I know probably my most iconic moment was the first time I saw a 3-toed sloth, because I've never seen one, but on top of that, a 3-toed sloth with a baby, and the baby was like awake and active, and they do this cute little hand scratching thing, and I literally started crying.
I was going to say, we might have seen Tammy cry more than once.
I could never imagine Tammy crying.
Well, let me, I know, right? I never cry. No, it was crazy, because like we were doing this tour with Pedro, the first day that we got there, and it's this tour that he does for anybody who signs up for it that's at Tulamar area. He'll take them on a walking tour to show them, help them pinpoint where sloths are, talk about sloths, educate, and all this stuff. And so we were walking, and we were with this family, and the family's part of the tour was done, so we were still continuing to walk with Pedro, and we're walking, and we look up, and I was like, oh, look, a sloth! Oh, look, a sloth with a baby. Oh, look, a sloth with a baby. There were 8 sloths in one tree, and Pedro was like, I've never seen that many sloths in a tree before. And it was just like, it was so overwhelming and just like amazing. It was like our welcome to TSI. And we got to see sloths at once.
Do you feel like you brought anything back for the care of our sloths here?
Absolutely. It made me understand our sloth's behavior so much better. Because there's always been these things that I'm like, well, Lightning does this, that's not normal, And then to find out that some of the stuff that she is doing is absolutely normal. So something that you would not know is that when it rains, sloths get very worked up and very active. And so Mo's always been like this chill dude. He never, rain doesn't bother him, whatever. Lightning, whenever there's a hose on or whenever it's raining, she gets super agitated and she's very active and she moves around a lot. And we found out that whenever it rains the next morning when we were coming in to track sloths, they're like, well, it rained last night, they're probably not going to be in the same place. And we're like, what are you talking about? And they were like, oh yeah, that's when sloths get active. That's when they go down to the ground to use the bathroom most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time. But it's the rain that gets them like worked up and it causes them to move around more.
Huh.
Is it because it hides their scent better, or is that the reason
For the bathroom,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. So,
Interesting.
but there's something about the rain that just gets all of them crazy, and they were all in different places the next day. So it was fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
And now you can understand our sloths better. That's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So much information.
Patrick, what about you? Did you have a favorite moment or favorite memory from the trip?
I think my favorite moment was we were lucky enough to see a release. So a mom and a baby that they had been monitoring that lived in Tulamar. Mom was originally cared for. She had some hip issues and was having some hip mobility issues. Released her. She was doing great. Had a baby. Baby was having some issues, so then they were like, okay, let's bring them both down, check them out, and do that. So then checking on them, everything went great. They're doing nice and healthy, so they're like, okay, it's time to release them. And we were lucky enough to be there for that release. And just
awesome.
Seeing that moment of like the excitement from the staff and the cool moment of seeing that sloth be like, oh, I know exactly where I am, because luckily her home range is right where we were basically. So it was like 10 steps out the door, put her on the tree, and she was like, oh, yep, I'm going to go up to my favorite spot. And just seeing mom immediately going up there, seeing baby being a natural baby was just a magical moment to see, like, oh, this is what that rehab and release looks like. And these are the animals that are using our ropeways. Because literally right above us was a ropeway that connects two different trees that we had seen them on before. So it's very cool to see that kind of experience.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That's starting off wanting to work with animals. I wanted to do like rehab and be able to release them and like actually like save them and put them back. And that's so cool that they actually know them enough to notice if a baby's having an issue or the mom's having an issue and recognize individuals and everything. And then to see it all get better and release would be amazing.
Just seeing those moments, I know, I eat those videos up online. And like you see an animal be released and it had been rehabbed for months or whatever it is, and then seeing them released back into the wild, just like the joy of the animal and then the joy of the keepers and people that took care of it to be able to kind of rescue it and bring it back to health. It's always awesome. Yeah.
And Patrick, how did it feel? So you watched videos of these ropeways for months before, and one of my favorite moments was watching you see the ropeways in person for the first time.
It was... I remember Bailey was like, oh, we need to do some videos for social media. Can you start talking about it? And I was like, no, I'm going to cry if I start. So I was just like staring there in awe, like trying to not cry as I was watching the squirrel monkeys that we referenced earlier, that they were crossing the road right when we walked in, and just seeing them actually use the ropeways that I had been planning for so long on, and like, okay, how are we going to do this? So it was very exciting and eye-opening, and just felt like there's only so much that you can get through a screen that once you're there in person.
Definitely.
That's same thing with the zoo. Like once you see it, like you can look at a video so many times, but when you see the animal in person, it's just something switches and it's a cool experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Bailey, what about you?
Yeah, I want to talk about we visited Manuel Antonio National Park, and first of all, one of the coolest things about this park is that it was incredibly accessible. Like, I think a lot of parks are not built for people who can't walk, right? So if you use any sort of mobility device, they're not as accessible, and this was specifically designed to be an incredibly accessible park. So I loved that. And then we had this tour guide who was just the chillest guy I've ever met. Probably friends with Mo, our sloth. His name was Rolo. In Costa Rica, Pura Vida is like it's just what you say to everything, and he was very poor of me though. But the actual thing that I want to say about the national park is when we were in this area that the Sloth Institute has worked in heavily, we were seeing biodiversity, like just like incredible biodiversity every 10 minutes. It would be like, oh, there goes this species, there goes that species. We saw all of the primate species within the first like 3 days that we were there in this area where people are living, like, right? And then we go to the national park, and this national park, people can only access 10%. So it's very likely that a lot of the biodiversity chooses to go into the 90% where people are not. But we did not see or even hear all of the primate species while we were there. And so it's not a saying on what the biodiversity actually is, but anecdotally, just we were like, let's go back to the Sloth Institute, which I think just really shows the value and the work that the zoo does with coexistence, investing in these areas where people and wildlife can thrive, works, and is really cool.
Yeah, and to build off of that, we were in a Airbnb, so we were just in like a residential area that it sounds like a lot of the national park tour guides live in, and we were just in a little house down there. But while we were like sitting on the porch, we had squirrel monkeys that were running across our roof. One jumped on the roof as Tammy was on the phone with her family, and like I heard her jump and scream. We had capuchins on our roof. We had bats that were drinking out of a pool that were nearby.
Oh,
it was
way.
So like the biodiversity was crazy. You could see we saw scarlet macaws flying over our building. There was a pair that lived in a tree that was closer up to the road from where we were. So it was just like the amount of biodiversity that was just in the neighborhood of like, oh yeah, these are where normal people live, and just all the biodiversity that you can see is just astounding.
Yes, amazing.
This sounds picturesque. I need to get down there. I'm jealous. Listen to all the stories. That's amazing.
I told Mark earlier, this is just a side funny note, is I mentioned I went for my honeymoon 11 years ago, and we said we were going to go back. At 10 years, we're going to go back, we're going to stay at the same place. And then, you get older, we had a child, and we ended up at Hocking Hills, which is an amazing place to go to, but it is not Manuel Antonio, Costa Rica, so a little different. But I would love to go back, and I highly recommend it.
Hey, you're 12 years next year.
Yes,
Just make it 12 years.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to add before we wrap up?
I mean, I just want to say that, like, I think what they're doing with, like, Bailey's position and everything, and Patrick and all that, just, like, bringing different people together in the zoo for a common purpose is really cool. Because myself as a keeper, I never knew how to feel like I was a part of conservation, how I was, making a difference or anything. So by being a part of this, like, yeah, I've been doing tours for 6 years. I've been raising money in that sense, but never really feeling like I was making an impact. So being able to go and do this project with them and be a part of this study has meant like so much to me, and I really hope that I know it is expanding out to other keepers. And I just felt like so grateful that I got to go, because it makes me realize that I actually can make a difference and can be a part of the change and the help and the support and everything. So I was just glad that I got to be there as labor for Patrick's project.
You were so valuable. She kept on saying, oh yeah, I'm just moving stuff around. She was making great decisions and helping with all these different, like, I was like, oh, I don't know, and then giving me great advice on things. But I could not have done it without these two.
It's a team effort.
Oh, 100%.
It is amazing how much more keepers are allowed, or not allowed, but like being access to doing on the ground like conservation work. It feels like lately. So.
Well, and I feel like we now have this great little friendship, like unlikely friends, but we're like really, really tight, good friends now.
Yeah, and the work that I have to just do a plug to all of you that do the behind the scenes tours, because those are just, we get feedback from our partners y'all's partners, right, that money goes to, of just how invaluable those resources are. A lot of times folks will be like, oh my gosh, this is gonna get us this thing, or now we can do this. And so it may not feel like it when you're doing the fourth tour of the week, but that has a huge impact on folks.
Well, and I know for like me specifically, whenever we were redoing our tours for this year, and I knew that we were doing this project and what this project was going to be, I intentionally had ropes installed around all of our sloth areas so that whoever's doing the tour can actually talk about, this is what we're raising the money for. These are what the sloth speedways look like. We helped install cameras. We're tracking the animals going across that. So I thought it was really cool to be able to see it in person. So when I came back and I started doing tours, I could literally talk about, this is what this means.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
This is what this tour is doing.
Yeah, I feel like at least on our end, that's one of like the most fun parts of the job, right? Is being able to do those tours and facilitate those experiences for people.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we have cool jobs. We're so lucky to work closely with these animals, and then the fact that we get to double dip and not only work with these animals but also do these tours and support these conservation efforts is it's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, especially with the recent change of 50% of the proceeds.
Yeah.
It was 20 and
Shout
50
out,
is
yeah.
huge.
It is
so.
huge.
It's massive.
Yeah. Jenna, do we have anything else for our guests while we have them here?
I have one final question for you all. What can I do?
I love this question. So as we talked about today, our partners in Costa Rica, a lot of their focus is, we've got this land, what species are living here? How can we take this land that I own, if you're somebody who owns a piece of land, and alter it so that they can move through it better? And in this case, it's the Sloth Speedways. But anywhere that you live, you can do the same. For example, in Ohio, Patrick has some really cute examples.
So the ones that I typically think about is, where are we doing with animals' houses, and what are we doing? How are they moving throughout their habitat? So in our backyards, there are animals that want to move throughout our backyards. One of the things that comes to mind typically are fences in my mind. So you can think of a lot of fences, maybe certain things, but if you put up a privacy fence, nothing's getting through there. That's blocking any animal from being able to enter your yard or exit your yard. For coexistence, sometimes that's good. You don't want a coyote eating your small dog. But in other ways, like being able to let a toad through and eat all of your mosquitoes that are hanging out in your yard, or letting all these other small animals that are kind of moving about your yard, that is a way that you can help them by just even cutting like a little 2-inch hole. In the UK, they actually have little hedgehog doors, where it's basically they'll cut out a part of their fence and put in this little plastic piece that just makes a little cat door, but just fits the size of a hedgehog.
It's like the cutest image.
It is
You have
adorable.
like a little hedgehog
But-
just popping in your fence, like, hi.
And that is something that you can easily do in your own backyard that helps all the other small wildlife that live in our area. Our little mice that don't go in our house that are eating plants and berries and help move and pollinate or spread seeds. Our frogs and toads, things that need to move throughout those areas that without that little hole in the wall doesn't help. The other one I want to talk about is actually trees. So you always have to think about, we've got these big canopies, what's all living in them, even in dead trees. So a lot of animals in our area love dead trees. There's a lot of nice little holes and nooks and crannies that you can hide into. So when you are thinking about trees in your yard, especially dead trees, are you thinking, oh, is this going to fall on my house? Is there a way to maintain it in some way, shape, or form? Maybe I can just cut off the top half so that other animals can still live in that area and keep that area wild and keep habitat for those animals. So those are my two big hits. But think about how animals could move through your yard, how you could help them move through your yard, and how you can keep their houses safe even when you don't know where they're going to be living.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love it.
that's awesome.
Thank you guys so much. I definitely would love to keep a tree that has a cute owl or something living in it. So there's the reason right there. So thank you guys for all the work you've done, helping the Sloths, helping the Sloth Institute, and for coming to talk with us today.
Thank you for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
Yes, thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
I know. Thanks for sharing the story. I always loved hearing about the trip. I'm sure all of our listeners are going to enjoy it just as much as we did. So we appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thank you all for tuning in to another episode. Until next time.
Have a good one.